Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Tucker Johnson, and today it is my pleasure to host some Nimdzi Insight colleagues of mine who have recently published a quite comprehensive report on the retail and e-commerce localization vertical. And it is now available on nimdzi.com. And the good news is it's free. This is not behind our paywall. This is not partners only. I'm not saying you should not be an Nimdzi partner, but even if you're not an Nimdzi partner, you can go over and check this out. It is quite comprehensive. You can head over and open that up now and follow along during this broadcast if you like, or check it out afterwards. I'll put a link into the comment section on LinkedIn here pretty soon. Quick introduction here. We host events, podcasts, live streams regularly here at Nimdzi, so make sure that you are subscribed to us on LinkedIn so that you can be the first to find out when we schedule future events. We are recording this live today, and the full recording will remain available on the Nimdzi Insights YouTube channel as well as our LinkedIn page and other social media. So if you have a colleague that could benefit from this information, you can share the full recording after the live broadcast has ended. Joining me today are three key contributors to this report. First, Beata Janashkevich-Cavalcanti. Yes. Giulia Greco and Arina Istomina are joining me today. And I'm sorry for butchering the names, but these three ladies have all contributed to this report, as well as honorable mention, my colleagues Rado and Laszlo also helped work on this report. They're not with us today, but credit where credit's due today. So special thanks to them. Let's jump right in. I'm excited to go over this report with you all today. Beata, I'd like to start with you. You were the lead researcher on this report today. Tell me a little bit about the background on why is this important information to know? What was the genesis of the report? And what were some of the neat things that you found out while working on this?
Wow. So first of all, it all started as part of our series of vertical reports. So we did hotels and travel agencies before. Now we're doing retail and e-commerce. And what was the second question? What was the most interesting parts, right?
Yeah.
So I think all of them, if I may say so, it's quite juicy, I must say. So we have parts about the e-commerce market, some growing markets as well as how to create a go-to-market strategy, how to deal with different content types. So basically, it's a really comprehensive report, so it's worth reading. Yeah, and then I'm so sorry. What was the third question?
Oh, it's all right. No, I was just wondering. So this is part of the larger series where we're doing Nimdzi Insights is publishing industry vertical reports, and they're all worth checking out. As you mentioned, this is quite comprehensive. There's no way we're going to be able to get through everything today. Fortunately, people can go check it out on their own time and read through it. I'd like to go through some of the data and some of the graphs in this report. Looking at market share, when I was reading this report, this one thing that stood out to me, because I'm so used to seeing these graphs on market share for different industries and seeing it dominated by US and Europe, right? And here, if we look at this, the e-commerce market share, we see a pretty significant majority market share from Asia Pacific. Who would like to talk about the market share and what specifically? I'd like to see not just what the market share is today, but which markets are growing.
Mm-hmm.
I will call on people. Beata.
Right. So yeah, it's a bit different this time, as China is one of the biggest markets. So of course, Asia Pacific is one of the biggest contributors there. US is also quite important there, but for example, Europe and LATAM is far behind in these times. That doesn't mean though that there is no growth in those areas. So of course, Southeast Asia is one of the blooming markets that we should consider, but there's also LATAM, Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. So we also have, for example, when it comes to Europe, we are focusing on Central Europe and Eastern Europe, which are very into digital services, which benefits e-commerce. This is also the case of LATAM. which due to wide distances, there's a huge, let's say, preference for fast and accessible services, and that also comes for shopping experiences. Yeah, so maybe I'll give the floor to someone else now.
I can
To not
add I can add a little bit of color or thoughts that I have about this, because I'm not the one who wrote the report. I read it and I gave feedback, and I thought Arina and Beata did an excellent job. First of all, it's so comprehensive and in depth. One thing that maybe we wouldn't necessarily get out of the report, but something that I just know because of my experience, is that in North America, e-commerce has somewhat almost plateaued, because everything, these type of things start in the United States usually first, and then they expand to the rest of the world, and digitalization is not proceeding at the same pace and level everywhere around the world. And so, to your point, when you're talking about the Eastern European countries where that are very, very invested in digital and tech, definitely. And so you see a growth that goes faster than any growth that has been in Mediterranean European countries, that traditionally are kind of lagging behind in tech and digitalization, generally speaking, from a cultural perspective, but also a business and government perspective. They're just not where they should be. And it's always been like this. And even though they talk about it ad nauseam, at least in Italy, which is where I'm from, it still doesn't catch up. So you have these other countries instead that are hungry, that have a younger population, and they're faster at adopting these things. While at the same time, in the United States, everything that needed to be done got done. So you've got your Amazons, you've got your Shopifys, you've got your platforms that are enabling e-commerce very easily for everybody who's interested. And at some point, you can only grow so much. Like, it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's done, but the growth is plateauing a little
saturated.
bit.
The market's saturated.
Yeah, it's saturated.
Yeah, and which means there's not as much opportunity for growth there, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
correct.
It's already the growth opportunity, the exponential growth opportunity has already been snatched up, and that was 10, 15, 20 years ago, right?
Exactly.
With Amazon.
Exactly.
But with these quote unquote emerging markets, there's much more opportunity, which
totally
is kind of makes the case it's a no-brainer for localization. If you're a US or European company and your growth is plateaued, it's like, well, there's markets out there that are ripe for the plucking. The challenge is that when it comes to e-commerce and retail, which are not the same thing, and I'm going to ask someone to tell me what the difference is, really, but let me finish my point. When it comes to e-commerce and retail, it's not like you're selling an online service that you just localize your content, localize your website, and bam, you're in a bunch of different markets, because there's logistical issues. There's a ton of regulatory issues. There's different cultural expectations around, not just around language. And we can talk about language and pull up the graphs, but cultural expectations around how long should I have to wait for a package? I live in Seattle, and if I have to wait more than 24 hours for my Amazon delivery, I get cranky, right? And everyone's laughing who doesn't live in Seattle, right? But that's just kind of what I'm talking about, these different expectations.
For sure. And it's like, and some of them are actually pretty basics, and yet they're complex to navigate, like shipping options,
shipping
pricing,
options,
payment methods.
Yeah.
Payment methods. It's like, this is the thing. It's like, it's hard for Americans to wrap their head around the fact that there are countries where credit cards are not a thing.
Right.
Like, they exist, but they are part of an elite, and they're not widely used, and they're not widely accepted. And when I remember, like, when I found out that in Germany, people still like to do a cash on delivery, I was like, come again, what? But it's a thing. It's a thing. It is definitely widespread. And so, yeah. Go ahead,
Not only
Arina.
for European countries, but Asian countries as well. We've done a study for a company where we just uncovered that in Asian markets, you definitely should have an option of cash upon receipt as an option for payment. Otherwise, that option just drops. So that's definitely true. And payment localization is a very important part of the whole user experience.
Well, I've worked on these studies before too for clients, and one thing that we found, and Arina, I believe it was in Russia, so you're going to correct me if it's wrong, but there's an option for like someone will come, you order clothes online, and they deliver it, and then they wait for you to try them on to see if you want to send them back. Is that actually a thing?
That's definitely a thing. Yes, there is a try on option before you even pay. So you can try on without paying a single dime or kopeck, whatever you prefer. That's definitely true, and that's another example of localization, of course.
Yeah.
See, I didn't even know that. That is amazing. I love that. I think we should import that here in North
Yeah,
America. I want to
exactly.
be able to try my clothes before I commit to them.
I'll call Jeff Bezos.
Okay.
So I'll let him know. Julia
I don't
says
buy my clothes on Amazon though, Tucker. Come
I
on.
buy my kids' clothes on Amazon.
Okay, fair
Um,
enough.
um, so going back to localization, I mean, we all know this. You know, the can't read won't buy. The four words we've all heard, right? So it's like your stuff needs to be localized in order for people to buy from you. And when it comes to e-commerce and retail, there's a level of trust that's required there because someone's sending you their money in hopes that you're going to send them whatever it is that you ordered. So when it comes to language localization or going beyond even language localization, what are some of the key points here on why localization matters? Like I said, we've all heard it. Can't read, won't buy. Why? Why is that? Beata, maybe you can expand upon this a
Mhm.
little bit for us.
Right. So, well, of course, let's start with language first. So, around 70% of users, for example, from the European Union, prefer to switch to a website that has a better language quality. So that already shows that language can lead to cart abandonment, which is a serious issue for e-commerce. It means that people, for example, they want to buy a product, they even add it to a cart, and then they somehow don't end up buying it. So in order to prevent that, we should, of course, include some payment methods that are localized, like tickers and like Tucker said. But it goes beyond that. So it also involves like things, for example, like pricing, because it's not just that we convert the currency into the local one, but the price also needs to be adapted. It needs to reflect the purchasing power, the income, the inflation levels. It's all that. It is also about website localization and properly, designing the user experience and the interface so that it is flawless and seamless and that people enjoy the shopping experience there. So this is all localization. And it all goes back to actually knowing the culture, knowing the language, and speaking the language of the people, even when it comes to things that may not scream to us that they are about localization, like user interface, but they are indeed. And this is especially true for e-commerce because we can't actually, saying we, e-commerce providers, of course. I'm not one, but somehow after spending so much time on this report, I started to identify as one, so sorry. But yeah, so they definitely need to include those things into their localization processes. But there are also different content types that need to be properly localized, and it involves a whole lot of different strategies and approaches. So it's a really, really big thing on the plate to digest.
Well, and let's talk about that. The different content types that you've identified. What roles do the different content types play? And there's a wonderful graph here that I'm going to pull up. What roles do the different content types play in the buyer journey? And what are the different priorities associated with those? Because not all content's created equal here. And
Yeah.
So, for example, I can pull this up here: localization complexity versus strategy by different business models. I love this graph, right? Because it shows, and not necessarily just different content types, but like who you're trying to reach and what the transaction actually is. And it's saying like, yeah, not everything needs to be human translated, but some stuff does. Walk us through this graph.
Hmm. Well, I can't see it, but I have it imprinted, so that doesn't really matter.
Mhm.
So if I start talking about something slightly different, just correct me. But yeah, it is essentially about different approaches, because we haven't just analyzed e-commerce providers, but we also focused a bit on retailers. So those are.
Now is a good time. I said I was going to ask someone this question. For the
Oh, you
purposes
should
of
ask
this
Rado.
conversation, what is the difference between e-commerce and retail? Well, Rado's not here.
Yeah, I know. So, well, in really simple terms, it really depends on the definition and what we want to take into account. But in our report, by retailers, we mean companies that have some sort of online sales activities that they allow buying things online, but they are not, for example, a strict marketplace platform like Alibaba or Amazon. So that's how we, in really simple terms, how we divide that. Of course, that it's not a proper encyclopedic, definition, but it's more of a how it actually looks like in the market. And so for example, the retailers that we took into account, that we talked to, thanks to Arina, they actually presented a totally different picture of localization than the e-commerce providers did. So for example, retailers tended to focus more on transcreation and high quality translation. So obviously they chose human translators, while marketplaces and huge e-commerce providers preferred machine translation because it's simply faster and it helps them to deliver this huge amount of content that they need to deliver daily. So that's the first difference. But of course, it's not just that we have to choose between human translation and MT, so machine translation. We also have human in the loop, for example, which is a great approach for those who want to both scale and use some sort of, let's say, speed advancement of MT, but also preserve quality. So human in the loop means that even though we rely on technology, there's still some human that does quality check on the content. So yeah, and I'm pretty sure that Giulia can add something as well to this one.
Yeah, Julia,
Sure.
but especially, I mean, you were at Shopify for a while,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
A while. So
A while.
so Shopify is an interesting situation because it's a platform.
Yeah.
Shopify's not selling things itself,
No.
right? It's a platform. So it's there's a little bit of nuance that's required in this. But what have you noticed in this about the need for human translation versus more automated approaches?
So it's definitely a thing. Like it's basically the concept that in localization teams talk about content tiering or content grouping or a hierarchy of content, right? And that's how you need to have that, because resources are not infinite. And so, you're going to have a budget, and you need to decide what content is the most important and is going to get the white glove treatment. So human translation, or maybe transcreation, copywriting in another language, and then all the way down to the content that is the least important, and you can machine translate it and call it a day. And then there's nuance, and there's other levels in the middle, right? One thing, for example, that's definitely a trend probably everywhere, is that chatbots, support content, everything that's meant to help a user solve a problem can definitely be outsourced to. It used to be machine translation, and now it's moving to AI and LLMs. LLMs are actually doing a really good job of that.
Yeah.
And so, where you used to have real humans doing multilingual support, with the aid of tools such as, a DeepL or a Lilt or those kind of, machine translation, or to Unbabel, those like systems. Now it's moving to sometimes internally created LLMs that are, devised to just solve this problem for that specific company. So they're like highly customized. Obviously, this is in the companies that tend to be tech companies that have, huge R&D departments and a lot of internal uh, skill sets, like internal people that have the skill set to actually do this, and they have a mandate to do this. So, then there's obviously marketing is always at the top of the pyramid, because your website and your marketing content and your advertisement and that type of stuff is usually the stuff that you cannot pull back if there's a mistake. You're not going to put an advertisement campaign, an out-of-home advertisement campaign, billboards around the city. If you have a mistake there, you lose your face and you have a PR problem. And so that's where you have a huge human involvement and a lot of iterations and a lot of eyes to, we were talking about this before we actually joined this live, like how many rounds of approvals are necessary to put marketing content out in the world. And it's a necessity, because in reality, you can't pull back from mistakes if they go out. One thing is to have a mistake in your help center documentation, like a typo or a syntax that's kind of like not that great. Somebody may write in and say, hey, this is wrong, or I noticed this to do you a favor. But people are there. They're not there for your beautiful prose. They're there because they have a problem, and the language needs to be good enough for them to understand and solve their problem. That's the purpose of that content. Whereas the purpose of a website, it's like your online business card. If you can't even nail that correctly, nobody's going to trust you. And so you need to make sure that you have all those I's and cross your, cross your T's and dot your I's, etc.
Yeah, well, and this is why, based upon my personal experience, like, I'm going to abandon my cart if the checkout screen is not properly localized. You know what I'm saying? Or if it's,
right.
If I'm buying from a foreign, first of all, as an American, rarely do I have to buy from a foreign company. But on the occasions that I do, it's like, I really don't have that trust. So if there's typos, if the website seems hastily put together, or there's anything suspicious at all, I'm not giving my credit card information.
No, exactly. And there's a few elements that are super important that people may underestimate. And so if you're like a solopreneur who has your own website, and you should pay attention that you got to have an address somewhere, so that people know that you're a real entity, because a lot of fraudulent websites, actually, if you go look in the footer, in navigation, etc., you can find an address for the life of you. And to me, that's a bit of a red flag. I buy online a lot, but I'm like, I don't know.
The scary thing is those fraudulent websites are getting better with LLMs, and you know what I'm saying? So they're getting harder.
Well,
to
they
spot.
can spoof a real website, like completely. So it looks like the real thing, but it is not. It just has a different, like it happened to me.
It happened to me too.
It's crazy. Like because we're like, wow, I work in this field. I should be able to spot one, but it was so good that I didn't. It's like a company that's German gets regularly spoofed by some fraudsters, and they replicate their website completely and make it look like it's a Canadian version or it's a US version or it's another country. So it just has a different URL. It's the same name, but with a different ending for that locale. So it's tend to reason that it is their division. Well, lo and behold, it's not. The company is only German, and you can only buy from the German site. And it keeps on happening to them. It's terrible. Like it's absolutely anyway.
But these case studies are out there. I mean, these stories are out there, and this is why it's so important to build trust with your international customers, or they're not going to be your international customers.
Yeah, and one more thing I want to say about that, about building trust, is like you have to have really clear, properly translated and correct term, like the shipping information, the returns and refunds information. If you have a little section of FAQs, like frequently asked questions, they're usually revolving around this topic. How long does it take for you to ship? What do I do if it comes damaged? What do I do if it's not what I was expecting? What's your refund policy? How much time do I have to send it back? That type of information. It's very important that it's done. I know it sounds boring, but it needs to be done correctly and kind of, quick, like earlier than maybe other things that are nice to have. So even there, from an e-commerce perspective, if I were a person selling something on, on a website, through a website, there's certain things that I would need to do first, and those are, my pricing needs to be locked down, and the description of the products needs to be well done. And now on the other end, you go on Amazon and you see a ton of products with terrible descriptions because it's kind of raw machine translation, right? And it's like people still buy it
because
but
it's
I think
Amazon.
Because it's Amazon, exactly. And they know that they're like, you tend to go there, you already know what it is that you're looking for, and maybe you bought it before. And so it doesn't matter what the description is, but you
And
are,
I know if I get scammed on Amazon, I'm just going to call Amazon and they're going to be
yeah,
like, oh, yeah, we're going to make that right. We're going to refund
yeah,
you.
exactly. So you're not, the risk is so much more minimal. Whereas with a direct to consumer type of situation, in a D2C situation, then these things matter way more.
Yeah.
And you don't have the guarantee that the seller is going to do right by you if something was wrong. And your product descriptions do need to be correctly translated, because otherwise you're going to lose sales. Like, people are just, to your point, people are going to abandon their cart,
Right.
and they are not even going to start filling their cart.
Well, and speaking of cart abandonment, I wanted to bring up this and talk through, because this is something that's really kind of unique to e-commerce and online sales, is this concept of cart abandonment, right? And Arina, I want to give you a chance to jump in here, because we've been just chit-chatting the whole time. How to prevent cart abandonment. So for those of you listening who can't look at the screen right now, this graphic shows local language, adjusted pricing, local payment options, localized brand message, well-designed UX, and localized website. And as you move across this, customer satisfaction is going to increase. So talk me through this, Arina.
Sure. Well, going back to kind of to make it full circle, let's go back to the content tiering, and let's look on the positive sides. No matter who you ask, for the most part, marketing, content, all of the important information like compliance and legal is not, given into the hands of MT or LLMs. They are all translated, at least with human oversight or just by humans, period. Well, from localization standpoint, of course, the better you present the checkout process, the better it's localized, the lower the cart abandonment is going to be. We're not going to talk sales strategies, how to prevent cart abandonment. Like, I know Shopify, for example, has a really good reminder system. If you leave something, it will send you emails for you to come back. But then again, if we go back to content tiering, it's very interesting how human trust works in general, because one of the companies that we interviewed as a part of this research, for example, let us know that they tried to polish everything on their website, including human, like just general, real feedback from users. They tried to polish it, and they saw a decline in sales because people thought it was disingenuous and it was automated / auto-generated because it looked too good. So to this extent, it's interesting, how humans do not like overly polished content when it comes to their peer-to-peer interaction. However, again, everyone we spoke to and everything we could find online just pointed towards the fact that marketing content and all of the important banners and UX and UI elements have been touched by humans to some extent, if not 100%. And I think our research points towards the fact that the better you do this, the less cart abandonment you will have in the end. And of course, we need to, speaking to this respect, the fact that resources in every company, retail and e-commerce is not special in this way. Resources are limited. So, of course, there will be untranslated segments just due to oversight or due to the fact that there have been some coding mistakes, and it just didn't get picked up. It's human factor too. But all in all, of course, it's just important to double down on how important the checkout process is and how important it is to build trust between you and your consumer. So yeah, a good way of doing it is, of course, making sure all of the important content is checked, there is a human in the loop.
Yeah, and to pull up the I moved away from it, but to pull back up the content tiering, right? So as
Yeah.
you mentioned, marketing very high importance. That's what's changing the hearts and minds of people, convincing them to work with you. User interface, high priority. Product descriptions, medium priority. Legal and compliance, medium priority. And I'm listing this because we have people that listen to this as a podcast. So, transactional and financial, medium to high priority. Customer support and user generated content, lower priority. So there's if you're running an e-commerce platform, they're in not using machine translation solutions for at least some of your content, then you're missing out because there's no need to human translate everything. Likewise, if you're using machine translation for everything, there's probably some stuff that you need to take a look at, right? And yes, I know machine translation is getting really good nowadays, but so when I say human translation, maybe that just means human in the loop or post editing or something like that, right? Another
Yeah.
interesting graph from the report here is the comparison of e-commerce models and localization priorities, and I love this because it puts everything on an axis, from high quality being the priority to fast turnaround time, which because sometimes often these are two competing priorities, right? And then a human on the other axis, we have human translation preference versus machine translation preference, and we see here for global B2C global brand retailer, for a marketplace, for a B2B, and for a C2C company, and they're different, for which ones. What are the priorities for each of these? Beata, could you talk us through this?
Sure. So, yeah. So first of all, retailers in general, the ones that we talked about, they were really big brands. So they focused more on quality, as it is shown in this graph. So as they went with quality, of course, they preferred human translation. But it didn't mean that MT was totally obsolete. So there is some part of the graph that also points out to MT preference for them. And they preferred quality over time, turnaround time.
May I
However,
just interject here for
yeah,
a
sure.
second,
Mhm.
to quote directly some of our respondents that we interviewed in course of this research. So, yeah, the main difference in layman's terms between e-commerce and retailers is that retailers generally have online, like offline, on-site shops. Let's say, well, any brand that you could imagine. And you could imagine they've spent years, decades, building on their own brand, building on this creativity, building on this trust with their consumers. And this is why they are very hesitant to just give up and give over to MT. And this is why they still meticulously use content creation and transcreation as their strategy, because they just cannot compromise on this in regards to how much they have invested in their branding.
Yeah, thank you. So definitely that. And so that stands a bit in the opposite to the marketplaces, for example. So yeah, as we said, we interviewed some big brands from both the retailer space and the e-commerce space. And for marketplaces, as they deal with a lot of different types of contents and different, many interactions at the same time, right? From different parts of the world, they really need to focus on speed. And quality comes sometimes second. It's not always second, but speed is much more important. Sometimes it goes along with quality, sometimes a bit behind. That depends on e-commerce provider. And there are also some differences when it comes to B2B, B2C, and Giulia covered that earlier, right? So when it comes to B2B, it's a bit less, maybe let's say that's less direct. So the trust is perhaps mutual, whether when it comes to B2C, the consumer does not have to trust us at all, and we have to convince them that we are actually a trustworthy website and that we want to sell them something. Again, I really should change the industry, I think. So yeah, if I missed anything, Arina, feel free to add.
Yeah. Well, of course, these are different in nature, and I would say marketplaces are dealing with a lot more content, just quantity-wise. So, and also not to open another can of worms, but not always the source language is English. So some marketplaces might have to even recreate the content for their businesses that trade on their marketplace. And there, of course, again, they need to compromise somewhat on quality because it's impossible in terms of timing to spend days or weeks on the rollout. It needs to get done in hours usually. So they are utilizing AI to even create some content, which is very interesting.
Well, and you see that. All right. You popped the AI bubble. Now we're gonna have to shift into that conversation, but
Sorry.
you see that like in the C2C space, right? Like I don't know if you have this, if you use this in other countries, but I'm a big fan of like Facebook Marketplace, where it's just like an online yard sale, people selling their used furniture to each other and stuff. And that does not justify human translation, right? So I bought a mirror from Spanish speaking family, right? Everything was nice and translated right there, right? And then I show up and they don't speak English. I'm like, oh, yo quiero el espejo, por favor. It was really awkward. But the online interaction was seamless. So so now let's shift into AI, right? And I kind of want to turn to you, Giulia, to see like what's from the client side. You kind of have your ear to the ground on what's the buzz going on around AI, the drive, the push for everything going automated, saving money, doing things faster, all of that stuff. And I'll
Yeah.
bring up our graphic here so I can have it in the background, AI and e-commerce localization. But what have you seen as the push for AI? What areas, there's some things it does well, some things it doesn't do so well, and some things it completely sucks at, right? When it comes to
Yeah.
e-commerce localization, where is a good fit?
Hmm. So first of all, it's what I said earlier, like support, any type of support, like chatbots, things that can
Right.
automate a first response type of line of defense. That's very good, because I mean, we are kind of in a recession. I think we can say that publicly. That it's a maybe kind of, but companies right now are not, generally speaking, the zeitgeist is that companies
They're risk
are not
adverse.
yeah, they're risk averse.
Right.
They're kind of hankering down and being like, okay guys, we gotta weather this storm. There's a lot of volatility, there's a lot of instability. We're not in growth mode, we're in hankering down and
As the
holding on.
only American on the call, I have no comment on any of that.
Yeah,
By
but
the
it's
way,
like, it is what it is, right? It's
Yeah.
not just because of the politics. It's like there's a lot of factors,
yeah, there's a
but
lot.
we all know what they are and we don't need to dwell on that. But it's so, because of that, everybody's running a very tight ship. And by tight ship, I mean like budgets are scrutinized and they are reduced. And everybody is looking at ways to save money, and they're looking to see if there's any extravagant expenses that they don't need to do. And so part of that, so the whole like adoption, crazy fast adoption of AI is actually driven by that, because it's like, hey, look at that. I can stop having support teams 24/7. These are humans that need breaks and they need to be paid and they need benefits. And I can actually have AI agents doing that. And that's going to cost me a fraction of the cost.
Yeah.
I'm
LLMs
just,
don't take maternity leave.
they don't take much, they don't take bathroom breaks either.
Right.
Like it's like, it's productivity, like all the time. Then there's interesting things happening where, we were talking before I left Shopify. I was actually talking with some of my team members, my technical program managers back then. They were like, we need to figure out a way of doing MT with AI smoothing. So whereas before you used to have MT and post editing done by a human, we were actually experimenting in doing MT, and instead of having post editing by a woman, let's have AI smooth it and make it sound natural and fluent and lovely. Because MT is better. Like the experiments that we ran were that MT was still more faithful to the source and better. MT doesn't hallucinate. It may make mistakes, but it doesn't have those
doesn't make
convincing
stuff up.
hallucinations. No, AI, because it's trained on humans, it's perfect. It's amazing at bullshitting, right? So AI is like, you use ChatGPT, that you tell ChatGPT something incredibly stupid. You're like, hey, I was thinking of, market bubbly water to babies. What do you think? And at some point, ChatGPT was like, great idea. You're such an innovator. You're like, what? No, you're not. That's the stupidest idea ever. Babies don't drink bubbly water.
ChatGPT is a kiss ass. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Like every idea I give it, it's like, this is a great idea. Okay.
Exactly. Like this is psychophantic, is that what it's called, right? That aspect. But because of that, I'm thinking, okay, how often machine translation, the problem with machine translation is that it sounds like machine translation. It's robotic. It may be correct, but something doesn't feel right, because that's not the way people speak. So you put the two and two together, and the incredible bullshit kiss-ass characteristic of AI, it's exactly what's missing from machine translation. So if you combine the two, you should have a good result. And now the problem is, how do you stitch everything together and integrate it so that you have a seamless workflow that makes sense and doesn't drive everybody crazy, and that you don't have people, LPMs, having to manually copy and paste and paste it back wherever it belongs, right? That's for the technical folks to solve. But it's an interesting way of looking at it, and I think that some LSPs and maybe some technical language vendors are already providing that, I'm pretty sure, or they're like figuring out how to provide it, because it is the first thing that you should be doing collectively as a language industry. It's like, you can do that. Now, of course, there's still, I know this, what I just said is gonna ruffle some feathers with human translators, and I'm sorry, and there's still room for human translators, but there needs to be room for everything. Then there are some incredible applications that I'm gonna mention it, but I'm not super in depth. Like, OpenAI did, Shopify did an agreement with OpenAI recently. It was in the news and in some industry news. And so it stands to reason that very, very soon people will be able to actually make purchases directly in ChatGPT.
Yeah, I was reading about that. And Shopify and one or two other companies and that were in the headlines about like moving to an all AI model.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, bless you. Right? Because no, seriously, because like someone's gonna do it and everyone else is gonna watch and see if this works or see if it blows up in their faces, or you know what I'm saying? So it's like, all right, let's see how this goes.
Yeah. Exactly. I'm on the same. I'm also like, okay, interesting, good for them.
Yeah.
For moving so fast and doing this. I mean, I respect that.
I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, that's a horrible decision. It's like,
no. I want to see how it evolves.
Exactly.
And how good is it? Are people actually finding it useful? Are they actually using it and all that? But it's definitely, there's a lot of experimentation going on right now. And the people that are doing the experimentations are the people that come from companies where, once again, there is the resourcing and the vision to leverage these tools intensely and in a very fast pace. So, but to Arina's point earlier, you have all these other brands that have invested so much time in positioning themselves as a quality first and foremost play, and AI can help, definitely. I don't know if it's gonna help on the language front, probably for some types of content, going back to the content tiering, some type of contents can definitely be done through AI. Once again, though, quality control is gonna become super important, some form of IQA, because of that incredible ability of LLMs to be believable even when they're hallucinating.
Yeah.
It's much harder to spot mistakes. The mistakes are not going to be blatant, like MT makes mistakes and they're usually blatant. You catch it right away that it's like, oh, a word that has two meanings and he picked the wrong one.
Yeah.
And suddenly the sentence doesn't make sense for the context. With LLMs, it's not that straightforward.
Yeah.
It's making shit up because it doesn't have enough, because we don't even know why. It's just making shit up.
And you have to really know what you're talking about in order to catch it. Like if I have it write a legal brief for me, it's going to give me a legal brief and it's going to sound super smart. But unless I'm a lawyer, like
you don't know. If you're not going to know. Yeah, you're not going to know if it's actually super smart or if it's a bunch of stuff that's going to land you in trouble and you're just trusting it. So that's the part that's hard, because I think that, and I know that there are ways of doing LQA that leverage different. So you have AI agents LQAing AI output from other agents. So you have a whole system. It's like basically it's as if instead of Arina translating and Giulia editing, it's Arina the AI translating and Giulia the AI agent reviewing, and then Beata the other AI agent reviewing the review of Giulia the AI agent. So it's like you have a whole cascade, a whole constellations of agents. How far can you take it without things going astray? I don't know.
Well, that's what we're finding out.
Yeah,
that's what we're going to find out. We're going to find it out together, one way or the other.
Yeah, hopefully in a good way and not in a bad, dangerous way. I mean, it's okay if we find out because of some horrible, purchase of shoes goes horribly wrong, rather than a new war being declared. Because AI agents were like, yeah, let's go to war. Yeah, sounds great.
Right. We don't need any. Anyways, on that, I'm going to change the subject away from that really quick. Thank you, Giulia. Beata, I want to go back to this graphic of the AI and e-commerce localization. You talked about the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 AI first approach, personalization, SEO, AI and technology providers and retailers, and AI. Can you walk us through this?
Right. So as Giulia mentioned, some companies are turning AI first, which means that they are basically transitioning into using as much AI as they can, which is that also localization is being handled through the means of AI. I'm not going to go into that in detail, as Giulia just covered it perfectly.
Yeah.
But we have some interesting issues there, which is, for example, shoptainment and localization of engagement. So when we think about AI first approach, it's not only that we translate for AI, but it's also that we, for example, offer some sort of different ways of buying stuff. So there's growing thing that is live e-commerce and social e-commerce. And that is all like part of this shoptainment universe, let's say. And shoptainment comes from shopping and entertainment. So it must be, it's like almost a game for users, so that it's always entertaining, it's always engaging. The brands are using different strategies to get their users to buy. It can be even something like coupon wheels or flash deals, for example. Some Chinese e-commerce companies are doing that quite effectively.
Temu. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh God,
so
I uninstalled it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a great example.
No, that's an example of a bad localization. I'm sorry, Temu. But, if you want to go into the U.S. market, take off all of the spinning coupon wheels and stuff. That might be cool in China, not cool in the U.S. Anyway, that's my free consulting for you, Temu. I'll send you.
Yes and no. As I can say, for example, from the perspective, I'm sorry, I don't know about North America, but for example, it was a big case here in Poland where I'm based. So we have a local e-commerce giant, and when Timo was trying to enter, it also came with those coupons. And at first, everyone was like, "Oh no, why is that here? We don't want that." And then our local giant got almost beaten by Timo in terms
no.
of sales.
Okay. Well.
So yeah, it's actually a big thing, and it seems to work, especially on younger audiences. As we
That's
also
the
cover
thing.
some.
Oh, you're
Yeah, we
saying
cover
I'm old and
some.
out of touch. All right.
Yeah, that's well,
Fair.
no,
Yeah.
I was
Fair.
gonna interject you for a second, Tucker, and say, yeah, this whole like what do you I can say it, shop and
Shop-tainer,
entertainment,
yeah.
the gamification of shopping. It's first of all, yeah, it's huge in Asia, but also Tucker, you and me, we're too old
We're
for
old.
this. Like we don't get it, but our
We're old.
kids do or will. You'll see. So you kind of need to know it because you need to defend yourself. But like as a parent, but like it's definitely a thing among the younger generations, and the report touches upon the differences between generations in terms of audience, and it's pretty massive and it's pretty interesting. So
Yeah.
yeah.
For example, some people I don't know, but there are features like TikTok live shopping in Asia,
Yeah.
which are also growing. So all of those stuff we have that covered. Yeah, so that would be the AI first approach. Then of course we have personalization. So people are looking more and more for personalized offers, and they want to feel like they are being thought of and cared for. So that's where companies usually employ AI for, to personalize the feed, to analyze the data, and to show some improved recommendations, for example. Then there's the SEO. So of course now Google search is also kind of going obsolete, maybe not completely, but more and more people use AI to search for data and for recommendations as well. So companies need to learn how to employ AI and how to appear in AI search, for example.
That's a
Yeah,
really
and
good
then
point that I've never thought of.
yeah.
Right? Because I'm not going to Google what's the best suitcase for my wife's birthday, because I'm just going to get like 9 sponsored links, right, on Google.
Yeah, exactly.
But I will put it into AI. So
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
search has been
that's
broken for a long time.
Yeah,
Like
it has.
search is not the way it used to be, and everything is being appended. Like I talk to SEO people, and it's like every week it's a whole new landscape.
Oh, I
The
mean,
things
just
are changing.
you say you talk to SEO people. It's like I
Yeah.
haven't really talked to SEO people. Used to be all over the place, right? Everyone would talk about SEO, and nowadays it's not as big of a thing anymore. Just because
It is big. They're just more behind the scenes, and they're
Okay.
not. I mean, I guess they're not enjoying their spot in the sun. At some point, when things were stable before Gen AI came out and everybody started using ChatGPT, I think they did enjoy a moment of like things were stable for a little bit, even though Google does change its algorithm and the way they set things up. But like now, there's also the whole issue with like the Google being accused of, being threatened that they have to break up the company because it's too big and has a monopoly. Like that part is also affecting the way things are being done. By search has changed significantly. It's not as effective anymore, and so AI is changed the whole way people do use it, because at some point, I mean, I remember when it happened, it actually, you went on Google and suddenly the results you were getting were trash.
Yeah.
Simple trash, and you're like, what the hell? So now you just go on Perplexity, and that's what you use, and you can check the sources if you want to be diligent,
Yeah.
because there's still the potential for being misled,
Yeah, you
for
gotta check
sure.
the sources. For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And on the contrary, there is like this other, let's say, end of the scale, which is retailers, which they represent a more careful approach. So there are also those differences in the, let's say, e-commerce space, that there's AI first, but there's also some careful view on it, because as we said, there are some risks that are associated with AI. Of course, misleading. There's some concerns about quality and safety of data as well. So this all needs to be taken into account. but it's a huge part in the report. So
Yeah,
I just recommend to.
I've been bouncing around through this report today, trying to get. It's a big report, people. So we're out of time today. I'm watching the clock here. So what I'd like to do is
Massive
just.
50 pages.
What's
So
that?
It's a massive 50 pages document.
50
I mean,
pages,
article.
right? 50 pages, and it's not. There's no fluff in here. It's a lot of good stuff. So if you're listening to this and you'd like to read more about the e-commerce and retail market, go over to nimsy.com and find that report. It should be, as of right now, it's still linked on the homepage, but you can always search for it as well. But like I said, ladies, we're out of time today, so I am going to wrap us up here. Stay tuned. Ladies, gentlemen, if you got value out of today's talk or enjoyed today's talk or just want to go a little bit deeper, be sure to download the full retail and e-commerce vertical report from Nimsy Insights. It's packed with in-depth analysis, data, and actionable insights for anyone involved in going global, whether you're scaling a retail brand, building a localization team, or optimizing your international customer experience. Remember, this report's just the beginning. If you're part of an e-commerce or retail organization navigating international expansion, if you're a localization leader trying to better align with product and marketing teams, I highly recommend reaching out to us here at Nimsy Insights. The report, it's great, but what you want to be able to talk to the Nimsy's team of experts here. So you can do that by going to nimsy.com, booking a meeting, or sending an email to info@nimsy.com. Special thanks to Beata, Arina, and Giulia for their insights today, and also to my colleagues Rado and Laszlo, who have contributed to this report behind the scenes. And of course, thank you to all who have joined us live or who are watching the replay, either on our YouTube archives or here on LinkedIn. If you have any questions or want to learn more about Nimsy Research, once again, it's info@nimsy.com. Thank you again, and I look forward to next time. Cheers.
Cheers.
Nice.